Chapter 1. Skimming through the shelves packed with hundreds, if not more, colorful books on them should lift Izuku's spirits. Especially looking through the hero comic part, but it didn't. At all. If anything, it added more salt to the rhetorical wound. Quirkless. He was quirkless. Because of something, he didn't know what it was. The doctor explained it to his mom, but he used words that Izuku couldn't understand at his age. Besides, he was more focused on the crushing feeling he felt. His ambition, his dream. Taken away from him. All because he didn't have what most of the society possessed. Without a quirk, he couldn't be a hero. Kachan said it, the doctor said it, his mom said it. Not directly, but he figured it out when she hugged him tightly and apologized continuously while shedding tears. Izuku shook his head, trying to get rid of all those thoughts. His mom came with him to this shop, so he could get some new hero comics and cheer him up. While he still had trouble reading and didn't understand a bigger part of the words used in them without explanation, he still enjoyed them, the colors, the action. Heroes saving people and triumphing over villains. Izuku truly found himself wrapped in the world of comics. He eyed the books on the shelves. Most of them had All Might on their cover. Izuku wasn't surprised by that. All Might was #1 hero in Japan and America after all. It was only natural for people wanting to see his adventures, even if most of them were fictional. Everyone enjoyed them anyway. Under normal circumstances Izuku would grab one of them to his already large collection without a second thought, but this weren't normal circumstances. All Might represented everything that Izuku couldn't ever hope to archive. All Might was a true hero with a charming smile and a powerful quirk. And Izuku couldn't even get a chance to try to become one. With a silent sigh, he hung his head low and left the shelf. He wandered for some time looking at the floor, before his eyes rose up. Izuku tilted his head to the side. He was still in the hero part of the comic section, but this comics were different. Lines were more sharp to them, colors more toned, but still somehow flashy. But the most important thing was that, Izuku didn't recognize any of the heroes here, which for a dedicated hero fan was simply groundbreaking. He deduced that maybe some older heroes, like more than 20 years before him. There was a guy with a hammer, red cape and some kind of armor with lighting around him. Then a huge, green human, whose muscles were rivaling All Might's, that was smashing through a wall. Next was a man in blue costume with a shield that had a fierce expression and explosions in the background, while jumping through the air. And then, some kind of flying robot. But the robot looked like a person. None of those rung any bells in Izuku's head, and as a dedicated hero fan he couldn't allow that kind of disgrace to shine upon him. Intrigued and determined, he took one of those with the humanoid robot. First thing he noticed was that the comics was rather dusty and the paper felt kind of old. Ignoring it for now, he started looking at the pages. Imagine his shock when it turned out it wasn't robot, it was a suit of some kind, that the main character made for himself to battle crime. Before Izuku knew it had read 4 of those comics. "Izuku, honey, what are you looking at?" His mom voice brought him up from his lecture. Izuku looked from the page he was reading at, to his mother who crouched next to him eyeing comics sprawled around the floor. "I've found this," he said, showing her the cover. "It's Ion Man." He felt his tongue twist at that, and judging from his mom's small laugh, he most likely messed it up. English words were hard to say. "I believe it says, Iron Man, Izuku." She said the name slowly to show him the proper pronunciation. "It probably means man made out of iron." "Oh. That makes sense," he said looking at the cover. "Man made of iron. Iron Man. The man who fought the crime in metal suit. Most likely he had some kind of strength-type quirk to be able to move around. But then again he could fly, shoot some laser beams from his chest and palms, and then there were rockets and other weapons in his suit. Multiple quirks. That sounded like a possible solution, but... Wow kid, you've got some brain there," came the voice with a weird accent behind him. Izuku jumped slightly and blushed. He was mumbling. Again. Getting over his embarrassment, he looked over his shoulder to find a rather old man with glasses and slicked back gray hair smiling at him. He wasn't Japanese, maybe American. He had a shirt with the store logo on it, so most likely an employee. The man looked at Izuku and then at comics laying on the floor. Nice taste, kid, no one really reads those anymore. Izuku raised his eyebrows at that. Why? This are good. I really enjoyed them. The man smiled even more, chuckling slightly. Those are Prequark's comics, kid. They're like over 200 years old. The employee explained, making Izuku gasp. Only guys working here read them, well. Some of them, myself included. He pointed at the comic Izuku was holding. I like that series in particular, do you want me to tell you more about it? The man asked and Izuku found himself nodding his head rather vigorously, making the man chuckle again. It's about a smart inventor, millionaire who had a terrible accident happen to him and decided to save people by using a super tech suit of his making. Smart. He must be super smart to build that thing. Most likely he has some kind of intelligence quirk. No wait, it's a Prequark comic, so maybe some kind of power that makes him really, really smart. Izuku mumbled under his nose, stroking his chin, and judging the possibilities of such a hero to exist in his era. Only to be interrupted by the man laughing loudly. You really have a brilliant mind and colorful imagination, don't you, kid? He said, making Izuku blush yet again and his mom giggle. Sorry to burst your bubble, but it's not that. Man said, looking into Izuku's eyes. What? Izuku couldn't help but ask. If the man with the suit didn't have multiple quirks or some kind of brain power, then what? He's just really smart. He's got a big brain filled with knowledge and ideas. That's it, kid. No quirks, no brain enchanting abilities. It's just him. Man explained Izuku softly. Izuku blinked at that, his brain coming to an abrupt stop. He had it spelled to him, but he wanted. No, he needed to have a confirmation. For his own sake. So. He's quirkless? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Man blinked at that. Well. Using our age terminology. Yes, he's quirkless. Izuku moved his eyes from the man to the cover of the comic, that showed the main hero in his suit, helmet under his armpit, smiling gently and looking ahead. Looking at Izuku. Something warm filled his chest. And he knew what it was. That was the same feeling he had every time, when he heard or saw All Might. The feeling that told him that everything was going to be okay now. That, he, is here. That his hero is here, watching over him. Keeping him safe. Giving him hope. Izuku sniffed and felt his eyes water, so he ran his hand over them. Hey mom. Izuku said, his voice being nothing but a soft whisper, but he knew he had his mother attention. Can we get this once? Of course, sweetie. His mom answered, hugging him lightly and kissing the top of his head. And do we have a book that explains words at home? A dictionary? Yes, we do, why? She asked, curious of her baby boy motives. I want to read and understand the words in them. Izuku said, while getting up, there was the ghost of a smile gracing his lips. If you want to read them, better start at the beginning. The man said, while eyeing Izuku, giving him warm smile. I can fetch you those, kid, they must be somewhere at the back. Yes, I would like that, mister. Izuku said, tilting his head. Stan Lee, kid. Gimme a few moments. Izuku simply nodded and watched the man go and look for the comics. He may not have a quirk. His dream may be laying in the mud right now. But his spirit is not broken. And Izuku would be damned if he gives up without a fight. If he can't have a power of his own, then he will simply develop it, building it from the ground up. Izuku kept his gaze glued to the page he was reading, completely ignoring the commotion in his classroom. Once again he wished his classmates would be more considerate, and keep all the noise an octave or two lower. Not that they're bugging him in any way, Izuku just didn't want to go deaf so early in his life. He lived in his own little world, and they lived in theirs. Of course he wasn't a complete douche, that role belonged to the very angry Pomeranian, with his ever-present scowl, a few sits in front of him. Maybe he was born this way. He tried to listen to what was happening around him, but only picked up on the important things. Like how, their homeroom teacher came with a stack of papers, started saying something about choosing their life paths, only to throw all those, rather nicely sorted for him, papers in the air, which in turn made his classmates cheer and start using their quirks. Didn't they know that was illegal? Then he heard someone ranting about his destined life path to greatness, while something popped and filled the room with a caramel scent. Only for his teacher to say something that filled the room with eerie silence, before laughter bursted from the class. Somewhere along that mildly annoying sound, Izuku heard his surname but chose to ignore it. The part he was reading now seemed rather complicated, he knew he would have to return later to it and make some notes at home. He really didn't want to mess up and make a miscalculation during the planning phase. But the very loud and obnoxious scream that sounded oddly like deku and non-stop popping cut his lecture short. Holding back a sigh that threatened to escape his lips, Izuku lazily rose his eyes from the pages just in time to see Bakugo ready to swing his arm at his desk, animalistic scowl and small red eyes directed at him. Izuku in a flash pieced together what was the most likely scenario that led to this unfortunate development. Weighing his options and taking into account that principal had all desks replaced last week, he chose to act. Support course, Izuku said in the most uninterested tone he could muster, which wasn't that hard, but it worked. Bakugo stopped mid-swing, his explosions vanishing completely after a second, but the scowl and red gaze piercing right through Izuku remained. He was finally getting to some interesting parts, but he knew that leaving his eyes out of the blonde form would lead to taking combusted sweat right into his face. Excuse him, he liked his face as it was. So he kept looking, not in the eyes, he didn't want Bakugo to think he's challenging him or something, God forbid. He glued his eyes to his chin, most likely the safest place to look. What did you say, you damn nerd? Bakugo nothing but growled at him. UA's support course. That's where I'm going. Izuku said short and simple, he really wanted to go back to reading. Bakugo huffed, shoving his hands into his pockets and somehow relaxed, but the scowl remained. Was it permanent by now? Good. Keep it that way, Deku, remember that it was me who aced the U. A mock test. Go with the other extras, at least they could use your shitty nerd brain for something useful. Bakugo said with his gruff voice sprinkled with satisfaction of putting the shitty nerd where he belonged. Izuku just nodded to him and watched him go. He wanted to correct his unpleasant ex-best friend #1 bully. Bakugo didn't ace the mock test. He did fairly well, getting 95%, which was fairly high, but he was still 5% shy from Izuku. Thank God that his teacher ignored his score. Izuku knew that saying that to Firecracker's face would be equal to uncomfortable heat and shockwave right into his nose and some other roughing. Izuku wisely chose life. Midoriya, came his teacher's sleepy voice. What are you reading? Again. Izuku didn't even spare a glance to the man, his eyes were occupied with picking up where he stopped reading. He realized that his teacher was trying to get him into trouble for what seemed like the 1000th time by now. The man couldn't handle that there was someone much smarter than him. Izuku only corrected him once, 2 years ago. Electrodynamics and energy conversion. College-level stuff. Izuku answered as politely and humble as he could. White people couldn't just leave him alone with his books. Maybe he really should take that early exam. He would have so much more time to read, gain money from his work or train some more martial arts. Not to mention the peace and quiet he would acquire. His social life was non-existent anyway. Izuku focused on his reading, completely shutting down the world around him. Now that the unfortunate commotion was out of the way, he could just read and take mental notes. If he remembered well enough, which he did, this was his last period. Which meant he was free in about 30 minutes give or take. Good, he had training today. Leaving the school grounds, Izuku walked at a leisurely pace toward the gym. He had some time to kill, so he decided that taking a detour and going next to the river bank, away from the main road, would do him some good. He wanted some quiet time, and read some more. The devious bell had rung right in the middle of an important explanation. Seeing the underbridge passage, he decided not to cross it and sit on the grass close to it. His mom said that he could use some sun, vitamins and stuff, and that he was too white. Mom once joked that he was whiter than a paper sheet. Excuse him, he wasn't. He compared it, and was a few shades away from it. Izuku was just about to open his backpack when he heard some weird noise from the passage. Like jelly dessert makes when you blow air into it using a straw. Intrigued, he rose up and looked into it. There he saw some kind of grayish-green sludge with creepy eyes and mouth. The jelly monster ranted about how he was being chased by some giant, blonde buffoon and needed to hide. Izuku wisely decided that he didn't want to deal with it and stood next to the entrance, hiding next to the wall. A few moments later he heard a notorious and slightly obtrusive voice, a call of the super move like the one in games, and felt the extreme wind pressure rushing past him. Izuku's mind registered that he knew that voice. He knew it very well. Taking a peek, he saw an abnormally tall, buff man with blonde hair that had two bangs sticking up like a V, wearing green cargo pants and a plain, white t-shirt, who held a grocery bag. Yup, suspicions confirmed. It was All Might, his number 3 favorite hero. In front of him, on the walkway and walls, was green goo. Piecing together what happened, Izuku couldn't help himself but say, "Wow." All Might heard him and turned to him slightly surprised. The two stared at each other for a few seconds and then, "Do not worry, citizen. The danger have passed." "Why?" "Because I'm here." All Might all but shouted, ending it with his iconic laugh. "I wasn't worried," Izuku said nonchalantly while shrugging a bit. "And could you keep your voice down, please? I've just left the school and there is plenty of obnoxious loudness there," he said bluntly. He didn't want to have a headache or damaged hearing. "Oh. Of course. Sorry." All Might answered him somehow bashfully with clear embarrassment. "Do you need a hand with picking it up?" Izuku asked, pointing to the whole passage behind Giant's back. "We could use those bottles of yours." All Might blinked at him, taking some time to process his words. After most likely rebooting his brain, he answered, "No need, young man. I've got it covered," waving his hand in front of him. "Nah, I've got time and I'm always happy to help," Izuku said, a small smile on his lips. All Might looked like he wanted to deny him yet again, but Izuku already made his way past him and started gathering gross to touch sludge into a more manageable pile. The two worked silently, slowly squeezing vile slime into plastic containers. Getting work almost done and securing the most important parts, eyes and mouth, Izuku thought that he needed to tell All Might something. "You know, I'm quirkless," he started, dropping the rhetorical bomb at the hero, making him stop and look at Izuku with surprise evident on his face. "All my life I was laughingstock for everyone around me. Especially considering that I want to become hero in the future. Thanks to you, I may add." He flushed a small smile at All Might, but didn't stop his hands from working. "I was, and still am, bullied for a genetic defect. The day I was told by the doctor that I don't have any kind of power like everyone around me was crushing. He stopped for a second, getting lost in his memories and feelings. But it didn't stop me. I still want to become hero. Still want to help people. And no matter what everyone says, I'll carry on. Maybe I won't be the number one like you, but it matters not to me. It's all for the public and media anyway. I aim to become a symbol, just like you. Although symbol of peace may be out of my reach. I don't think I'll ever have power to be that. Maybe a symbol of hope or something like that. Izuku finished, both his monologue and gathering the pile of disgusting goo. He felt somehow lighter, getting it all out of his chest to the man, who inspired him to choose his life path. Izuku rose up, straightening his back and sending All Might a big grin while handing him a bottle. All Might took a while to wrap his head around his declaration. His face morphing from surprise to slight shock and finally to admiration. Recognition. Izuku wasn't sure, but the giant smile and full belly, friendly laugh made him feel at ease. Young man, those words you've just said, moved me deeply. I admire your determination and your dream. I'm going to be honest with you. The moment you said you're quirkless and still desire to be a hero, I wanted to stop you there. But I know my words would just dump down your spirit, nothing else. Let me warn you though, the path to heroics isn't padded with roses, and hero life is a dangerous one, trust me on that. His voice turned very serious at the end. No doubt some kind of personal experience. But seeing the look in your eyes and hearing the drive in your voice. Allow me to say those words to you. You, young man, can become a hero. A splendid one at that, no doubt. So carry on with your dreams and change them into reality. All Might finished while giving him a thumbs up. Izuku couldn't help but smile widely at that. He felt his eyes itch a bit, most likely due to the tears that were threatening to fall from them. Stupid Midoriya waterworks. Quickly he rubbed them against his sleeve and looked at the hero. Thanks. That means a lot to me. He eyed the bottles that were shoved into All Might's side pockets. Considering that All Might's most used way of transport was literally jumping into the sky, those two containers were sure to fall out. Give me a moment, All Might. I have a duct tape in my backpack. We can secure the bottles with it. Better be safe than sorry. He said, already looking for said item. Good thinking, young man. And while we're at it, would you like an autograph? Izuku blinked at the question. Did he want one? Yes, very. As a dedicated hero fan he always wanted to have one. And having All Might's, no doubt he would frame it in his room. Did he have something to write it on? Not really. In his backpack were only book he was reading at school, some basic supplies. And his inventions to build in the future volume. 13 feet notebook. While taping bottles secure, he was thinking about using the notebook. He would consider it as some kind of blessing. Yeah, that would be good. After getting All Might's signature, telling him his name and watching the hero take off into the vast sky, Izuku turned around and picked up his pace from leisure walk to march, barely containing his excitement. He didn't want to be late for his training. Izuku fished out a simple black earpiece and put it on. Alan, please tell me that we have that recorded. He asked, while grinning from ear to ear. His cheeks hurt, but he didn't mind. Of course, sir. Answered him a computer voice in the earpiece. I've already cut it and saved under a very appropriate name. Oh my god, it is All Might and I'm trying very hard to not fanboygasm right into his face. Alan, Izuku started, his smile now strained. I really hate you sometimes, you know. I'm doing my very best, sir. Chapter 3. Nezu kept glancing around the observation room. Teachers slowly filled it, sitting comfortably in padded armchairs. Midnight and Mike were chatting rather loudly as usual. Snipe, Vlad King and Cementos engaged in small talk, 13 and Ectoplasm cutting in from time to time. All Might in his small, withered form observed the screens, watching candidates preparing to practical part of the hero course exam. He could bet his money that Yagi was already looking for potential successor. Eraserhead stood in the corner, his back against the wall and eyes closed. He seemed to doze off. Well, when time comes, Nezu knew that Aizawa would be very meticulous in watching kids struggle. And lastly, Majima-san, did something happen? Nezu couldn't help but ask. Ever since the support course exam last week, Power Loader was, Nezu had hard time placing his paw on it. Majima was going from being super excited and a bit giddy, to complete desperation and downwards Aizawa's dead inside state. He even caught him stealing some of Vlad's secret vodka stash. Power Loader turned toward Nezu and folded his arms on his bare chest. It's just that I'm going to have two very unique students. He ended with heavy sigh. Going to. We still haven't gone through support candidates' scores. Nezu inched closer, putting his head on his paws, small smirk dancing on his lips. Power Loader barked a laugh and shook his head. Oh, trust me on this, boss, those two already are in our school. Looking at their scores is just a formality. Nezu couldn't help but grin at that. So where does your problem lie? One of them is definitely going to be a death of me. Majima answered in so familiar Aizawa deadpan tone. And the other one, he's a genius. I had to ask him during the interview to explain some things to me, because last time I heard them was in college. Power Loader chuckled a bit. You're going to like him. Nezu grinned widely at that. Excitement bubbling in his chest. Maybe he's going to pay a visit or two in support studio. But I'm fighting with my thoughts. Majima admitted, scratching his chin. Nezu just nodded his head to continue. I'm sure that if those two click together they'll push each other into greater highs. He paused for a moment, shivering slightly. But I also fear that they're gonna do something that'll probably result in our early demise. Nezu laughed at that. Now he was sure that he's going to drop into studio to watch those two. I can't wait and see what their inventions are. Nezu admitted and turned back to screen. It was almost time to start. Power Loader chuckled silently. Oh, you're about to see one in the exam. He said, gaining Nezu's attention again, this time with puzzled expression. Let's just say that I've taken a bit of liberty and added something that Genius Boy made. Pop paused for a second. No spoilers though. He ended, gluing his gaze to the screens. Nezu fidgeted in his seat, excitement overflowing. Now he was looking at every monitor, searching for clues, wondering what the oh-so-talented future student did. He had to scold himself more than a dozen times. That riddle Power Loader left him with was keeping his attention away from hero hopefuls. It was subtle at first, so subtle, that he was sure he missed it at the beginning, but then it started becoming more and more clear. He heard murmurs beginning to rise in the room, other teachers picking it up. Questions flowing from one to the other. Is it me or do those bots seem smarter? Finally Snipe asked what was in everyone's heads. Nezu heard cackling and looked at Majima to see his shoulders rising with every sound, huge Aizawa-like grin on his face. Majima-san, would you be so kind and enlighten us? Power Loader took few deep breaths and turned toward his fellow co-workers. What you're witnessing, my dear friends, is the work of a support student candidate. He savored their surprised reactions, even the ever-so-stoic Aizawa raised his eyebrow. In his mind he started thanking Genius Boy, his work was going to make his day. Long story short, Kid not only changed the whole bot operating system. He gave them a new one. He gestured to the screen to show how one pointer dodged a laser beam with movement too complicated and refined for old robots. Not only that, he also added a learning program to it. Bots now observe, analyze and develop counter strategies, and to spice things up, they share information between themselves. Lastly, if a bot judges that his opponent is too much for it, it calls for help. To sum it up, our bots think just like a normal human being. To say that teachers were shocked would be an understatement. Almost every jaw hung open, Aizawa's eyebrows seemed to vanish in his hairline, which was enough for Majima as he allowed his lips stretch into the biggest shit-eating grin he ever had in his life. He was sending this kid a basket. You're saying that a 14-year-old did that in 3 years? Came the question from Mike, his voice pure bewilderment. Oh no. Power Loader laughed, getting comfy in his seat. He did it in 2 and in the other hour he vastly improved the bot's power cores. At the interview he said to me, if I had 1 hour more, I'd improve their AI even more, or something like that. The choking noises from some of his friends were music to his ears. Then came the 0-pointer and they watched as students turned into massive headless chickens. All of them running away as far as possible, not caring about others, their own safety first and foremost. Displeased sounds made a round around the room. Suddenly screen switched to show a girl with brown hair stuck under a huge slab of concrete. She tried to turn around and touch it, but to no avail. The biggest problems. No candidates around her and a giant behemoth rolling towards her. Power Loader, stop that robot. Came the distressed call from All Might. No need. Majima answered nonchalant, checking his nail protectors. What? This girl is going to be rolled over. Yagi screamed, standing up, steam rising from his body. She won't. Power Loader pointed to the screen, smirking slightly. Just shut up and watch. They all watched in anticipation as the giant robot came closer and closer to where the girl was lying, and completely ceased its movement. Its head spun around, making it look like Lost Puppy. Then lowered its arm, swiping the concrete from the girl just to gently pick her up and leave her on the side of the road. Then it casually continued chasing after other kids, making girl stare at it with her jaw hung open. Kid added extra lines for the 0-pointer. If it can't go around students unable to move out of its way, it helps them. Tested it on myself. Majima simply stated, burning the image of his coworker's slack jaws with Nezu insane laughter in the background into his memory. He couldn't wait for that genius kid to come to school. If it lead to more situations of this kind, Power